How's everyone doing?
Hey, everybody.
All right. So I don't know if you guys know this, but this is a continuation of our powwow. Every 6 months we do it. We did one in October. Feels like we did it yesterday, you know.
Was that October or December?
It was in October. October 10th
Okay.
October at 10 a.m.
In Santa Monica, at the
In
airport.
Santa Monica.
You got a thing for planes, I notice. It's a theme for you.
Well, it's we don't want to do a conference in just four walls of a conference room.
Got it.
It's we want to inspire people. We actually want you to be like, you know, enthusiastic while you sit in your Uber or car and like, oh, I'm going to a worship, and you know, get your heart pumping and get the adrenaline going before you actually get here.
I really appreciate having to go after literal rocket scientist Steve Jurvetson. I mean, it was pretty great. Let's give him a round of applause, huh? That kid's smart. Thank you for putting me on after him. Now I know I'm going to be the second best speaker at the event. It's brutal.
Everyone's a good speaker. Everyone is a great speaker here, and we are not ranking any speakers.
What were the
here.
two things I told you last time when we talked? There were two things I told you about Bitcoin and ICOs and all this crypto nonsense. What did I tell you?
All right. The two things I remember.
Two things you remember.
You said that you were going to take half of my conference and work with me. That was one thing I remember.
Yes.
You made an offer on stage.
I did offer to buy half your conference, that's true.
And the second thing I remember was that you said people should bank their win.
You always got to bank a win. So
Right.
if you're one of these crypto kids and you were smart enough to mine crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, or buy Ethereum in the pre-sale, you got to sell half that shit when it's skyrocketing and buy a house. I meet all these people who've made 100 million or 10 million and 20 million on crypto, and they don't own their house, they have no money, but they've got all these coins and they're hodling. That's a huge mistake. And the second thing I told you was these ICOs are going to end in tears.
Okay.
Because if you sell securities and you claim they're a Chuck E. Cheese token, the SEC does not recognize Chuck E. Cheese tokens. They recognize securities, and when you take the public's money,
Right.
and they consider it an investment and they want it to go up, you have a responsibility. And so what we're experiencing now in crypto is this bottoming, right? It's been terribly depressing for the last 6 months, right?
Well, in hindsight, if you look at the curves, you would say, yes, it went up, let's bank the win. But when you don't have the, you know, the 2020 vision, and how do you know that it's like at a high or at a low? How do you gauge that?
Well, you don't know ever what the peak is.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the way to get rich is to sell before the peak, not after it. So if you know it's going up,
Right.
sell a little bit on the way up
Okay.
so that you have what's called idiot insurance.
Okay.
And you keep banking wins as you go. There's no harm in taking a little bit of cash for your Chuck E. Cheese tokens, because Chuck E. Cheese could shut down, and the tokens would be worth what if Chuck E. Cheese shut down?
So what happens?
Zero.
So what happens to the guy that bought 2 pizzas, you know, a couple of years ago? That poor guy is probably having nightmares that he banked his win when it was like 50 cents.
Well,
and didn't wait for it to be 19,000.
I know a lot of people who sold some of their Google or Uber shares early. I may know
But aren't you
a couple of
hodling-
people intimately who sold their Uber shares.
But aren't you hodling Uber shares right now?
I can't talk about my holdings in the Uber Corporation,
Okay.
but
Did you bank some?
I'm telling everybody here to bank, so I would bank if you had some.
Okay.
Because nobody knows the peak, like we're saying, but you
Right.
can determine if something's a mania. And what we experienced in the fourth quarter of last year was clearly a mania, where people were buying stuff without knowing what they're buying. This, to me, was a huge red flag. If you're buying securities and you don't know what the company does, you don't know who the person is, well, then you're just gambling. You're just speculating in a very random way. And you know this is true, Kurt.
So can I take the other side of it, which is, so what if they want to gamble? You know, we gamble in life all the time. We go to a different university, we say, hey, I want to be an astronaut, we want to be a scientist, but we end up being, you know, maybe something else. Why not let the people make the decisions for themselves and let them warm up and level up?
Sure.
Why have the SEC be that regulator? How did they get the power to do that?
Yeah, so the way they got the power to do that and the way they came up with accredited versus non-accredited investors were during the Great Depression and before that, people started selling mines in California for gold mines, and they took old people's retirements and said, you own shares in a gold mine. And the old people gave their money, and what they owned was an outhouse on top of a plot of land in California, and they never got any return. So we came up with some rules. Now, some people would say those rules are antiquated.
Yep.
I agree with a portion of that. If you can go to Vegas and bet your money on black or red or in the sports book, sure, you should have some ability. But you also need to have some ownership on the other side, which is why we have things like Know Your Buyer, which now people in ICOs are like, oh, we should know who gave us the money, because if it's ISIS or North Korea or Putin, that might matter, right? So there's some maturation that has to occur. It would be nice if the people who are raising the money for the ICO portion specifically actually produced a product before taking people's money. That's kind of the gold standard now in Silicon Valley. If you want to get money from angel investors, they say, show me your product. Now, when Steve started in the industry back in 1972, I'm sorry, no, Steve was about 85 or so. He's old, but not that old. You could go with a business plan, but if you showed up with the business plan to get funded at venture capitalists, you better have had a team that went to MIT, Stanford, or wherever. So you basically, the proxy for getting invested in was your degrees and your work experience, and then a business plan. Now, because it only takes 6 weeks or 60 days or 6 months to build a prototype, in Silicon Valley we say, if you would like money, take the 6 weeks or 6 months to prove by doing your side hustle and making a prototype, walk us through it, and maybe do a little pilot program with 10 customers or 10 people. And let's look at the data.
Right.
The real issue with ICOs were you had people who had no talent, no experience, no degrees, grifters, criminals, incompetent people, a whole range of people, and then the early true believers who were super competent people. But I would say the early true believers were less than 5%. 95% were incompetent or outright scams, and they hadn't proven their worth by building something. I don't know when I angel invest in a company if it's going to succeed or not. So what I do is I look in the person's eyes, I try to get a read on them. Like, I can tell that this conference matters to you, I can tell you're a hustler, you put a lot of work into stuff, but then I look at the body of work. I look at the product.
Right.
So when Travis showed me Uber, I looked at it, I was like, well, I know Travis, he's a friend. I knew him for 15 years before that, but his product, even in the nascent state it was, there were only 2 cabs on the road when I invested. He said, look, you can rate the driver. And I was like, oh, that changes everything. In New York, you just fight with the driver, and if you want to have any recourse with a bad driver, you have to be a nutcase and write a letter. This is great. You can take somebody off the system if they're low rated. That's going to make behavior go in the right way. Just that one thing was so innovative that it made it easier to invest in him.
Right.
And now that the crypto space is in the trial of despair, where people are going to do the perp walk for selling securities and get arrested by the SEC, this is serious shit. It's already starting to happen. Everybody has to, who was remaining in the trial of despair, has to now make the products or give the money back. If you took money from people to build a product and you didn't build it, in my mind, you're a criminal.
But can we not say that this is early days for them to build, like we are going through like this governance model that is not there, right? It's almost like mushrooms are popping up, right? And after a couple of iterations, we will learn and we'll understand that, hey, if you're building a plane and you only have one wheel and one wing, it's going to probably fall. But we haven't had that scenario yet, right?
Except we have 50 years of history of venture capital and startups. That people could just, you could have just talked to any of us over here. We know how this works. You know, like, we kind of know the playbook. So I think people did this. It's very interesting to me that Los Angeles became a big center of crypto, because I saw the same thing happen in the dot-com era.
Right.
I have a theory.
Okay.
When you go to LA, nobody has a job. And you talk to people, you're like, hey, what are you doing? They're like, yeah, I'm working on a couple projects. And you're like, oh, like what? And people get kind of insulted if you drill down, whereas in New York, everybody's like actually building shit. So every time some new technology like wave happens, whether it's .com or crypto or VR, all the people with no jobs in LA are like, I'm in that. I'm in crypto. I'm in VR. I'm in .com. Boom, that's what I do. They get a business card printed, and then they don't wind up doing anything.
just for the record, I do token sales orchestration during my day job. This is what we do.
That's the other thing. Be very careful about.
This is what we do in the evening. We have apparently a lot of time on our hands, so conference is not our full-time job.
But the promoters are going to be in serious trouble, and the crypto hedge funds. This is going to be super disastrous.
So tell us, if the traditional VCs, when they used to do, or in my mind, I'm thinking that whole industry is now disintermediated altogether.
Yeah, no, it's so scary that the ICOs have made all of us investing in unicorn real companies with billions of dollars in revenue. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming, oh my God.
No, maybe you're not doing that.
Some great founder is going to do an ICO and not take my investment. Are you fucking kidding me, Kurt? Are you kidding me?
I'm not saying that you're waking up in the middle of the night looking for a deal flow, but what I'm saying is, isn't it time for a new way of getting a developer to get his ideas through the door?
Okay, now you're onto it.
Right? And
now you're onto the good stuff.
He or she does not need to... They. I mean, in the case of Uber, right? He did have some chemistry with him. You had known him for 15 years. All the top VCs actually passed on him. You were the first 4 with a couple of other people to do.
I had the list of 22 people I emailed and 3 who said yes.
Yes.
I got the 19. I got the names.
Right.
It's in the next book.
Yeah, so if you look at a developer today, if he wakes up with a great idea, I don't want that developer to spend time spinning his wheels to get the VC money. I want him to go out there, build the product, and if there are 100 people who want to give him $1,000 each, let them do it.
Well, this is where, people can do whatever they want as long as they're not committing crimes.
Well, they can't right now because the SEC is,
The SEC is interested, they're very principled people, and they're not interested in interpreting or reinterpreting laws. Their sole interest is in protecting consumers and enforcing laws.
Yes.
And this is the problem with a lot of people's intellectualization of the crypto space. They believe that because they can conceive of this not being a security, that will in some way sway the SEC. And what we've learned is it had zero impact on how the SEC looks at this.
Right.
And if you want to do something really groundbreaking, I think you have to go to a country that does not care about consumer retail investors as much. And there are plenty of countries out there that literally don't care how consumers spend their money. So that's a better option for them. But the interesting thing you brought up there is the developers. I think that's where this gets super interesting is, if developers vote with their talent to go work on these open source projects, the Brave browser, which I've been using exclusively for the last couple of weeks and is pretty impressive, I think that could be the tipping point. That would be the one that would make Silicon Valley very nervous. So if a group of people were going to create the next Uber or Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and a group of developers owned all the coins and tokens in the system, and they decided, you know what, the tokens are appreciating more than Google or Uber or Tesla could ever pay me, that could actually have a big impact.
But isn't that happening now, where the developers
Not really.
from the fiat, physical Fortune 500 companies are now moving on to...
I think it's fringe. It's fringe.
And you don't think it's going to ramp up?
Unknown.
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 Okay.
We'll see, because they would have to then have liquidity in those tokens and have to take that variability. So it's possible. Is it probable? I'm more at possible than probable.
Got it.
But I do think that the silver lining in all of this, because it was obvious to me, having seen this movie before, that this was all going to come crashing down, and the SEC was going to literally start doing perp walks, which is what they're doing, and it's not going to end, and the hedge fund crypto people are going to be the ones who take the biggest hit, because they should know better, as well as the promoters. Because people who are promoting token sales, not believing their securities were being dealer brokers and taking commissions, those people are in all likelihood going to go to jail, or they're going to pay huge fines and be banned from selling securities or participating in securities for life in all likelihood. Putting that aside, the huge silver lining that this has shown us is that there is a global desire to invest in technology startups that is much greater than anybody ever anticipated.
Right.
And if you look at Tezos, hundreds of millions of dollars, bet on people who've done nothing but write a white paper. Telegram, bet on somebody who has built something very significant, but giving almost $2 billion, it's unbelievable, it's insane. This shows us that there is an unbelievable appetite for risk on a global basis, and if those dollars could be steered properly, that could change venture capital forever. And that's why today I'm announcing Jcoin. Jcoin, you're in. Jcoin is a way for you to take all of your crypto wealth and give it to me to invest in startups legitimately. I'm joking.
No,
I might not be joking. If there's somebody who can set this shit up and not go to jail, let's do it. But
okay.
I do think that's the major silver lining. Also, distributed stuff, to me, is fascinating. If you look at what's going on with Twitter right now, Twitter, when the boys who started it, who are good friends of mine, they really wanted to be like the free speech wing of the free speech party. Like, they wanted to be the fringe of the fringe.
Right.
And we see how that worked out for them. Once you become a corporation that accepts advertising, you cannot be tolerant of free speech anymore. So Milo Yiannopoulos, anybody on the right, anybody who's a provocateur, anybody who makes jokes, they've got to be banned from the platform, trolling, etc.
But that's exactly the point.
That's where it's going to get interesting, because a distributed network or a distributed Twitter, distributed Facebook that nobody owns, and that's on the blockchain, and I started playing with one. I forgot the name of it, but I downloaded the app. There was nobody there. And like somebody's like, hey, follow me on this. Anybody know the name of that distributed Twitter?
Mastodon.
Yeah, that one, Mastodon. So I loaded that. And I'm like, how do I follow you? And the person's like, oh, go to this server, type in this hash. And I said, I'm sorry, what do I type in? Like, you got to put my hash in. I'm like, where the fuck do I get your hash? She's like, I'm going to send it to you right now. So the guy sends me like a huge half-page hash. And I'm like, really, guys? Who the fuck's building this? How about a handle? But my point is, the guy said, so then I start DMing with the guy. The guy's like, I want you to know, be very careful, because everything you say is permanently on the record. I say, get the fuck out of here. He goes, no, that's permanently on the record. You may not want to say things. I said, you're totally full of fucking shit. This is totally not going to be saved on the blockchain for fucking ever.
You know,
Absolutely.
Well, we are on the warship, so.
Kurt, your wife is waiting for you at the front desk, Kurt. Kurt, your wife is waiting for the front desk. She wants to know where you left the car keys.
All right.
Keep going.
I forgot my train of thought.
We're talking about the distributed nature of this. So
yeah.
I think that this is brilliant. And, you know, Kazaa and BitTorrent and a lot of these things never really took hold in mainstream society. They're kind of like fringe things to this day.
But let's pretend
that could be very powerful.
Let's pretend you go back 100 years, and people are in horse-drawn carriages with no
Steve remembers. That was Steve's first investment. Actually, you don't know that.
There's no autopilot,
company.
there's no follow me, there's no cruise control, nothing. And you jump into the horse carriage and you're like, hey, where's the cruise control? And he's explaining you like, hold the reins and hold it slightly tight. Yeah. So when somebody sends you that hash, we are exactly in that stage.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
So I think from that standpoint, I think we have to empathize and say, hey, yes, we are there.
Absolutely.
Let's use it and build it, because just like nobody can predict once the when the stock hits high, you're going to get some kind of traction and
I think
inertia.
I think it's going to be a game changer, because San Francisco used to be an incredibly tolerant town, like crazy tolerant, like really fringe. It was kind of the fringe place, and now it's largely intolerant, and there's a lot of
I do see,
and I think the election of Trump, which we talked about last time, is in part a reaction to this intolerance of different people not listening to each other, talking over each other, whatever it is. And I think it could become wind in the sails of these kind of mastodon projects, where if nobody's running it, well, I can't ban you for having an opinion, and you can't ban me. I mean, we might be able to block each other, but we can't ban you and deplatform you. The deplatforming of people is truly dangerous. If you think about Twitter banning Milo Yiannopoulos and some of these people, like, you may not like them, that's fine, I understand it, but the deplatforming now is getting to the level where you cannot register a domain name, you can't use a CDN, you can't use a hosting company. So when we started the internet, the idea was like, hey, this will be free for everybody and freedom of speech. Now we're getting down in the stack to like not only the HTTP level, but now to the DNS routing, your CDN, your server, and even the registration of your domain name. And we have the ACLU, which protected the Ku Klux Klan's right to march down streets and said, hey, freedom of speech is that important. And now we're saying, you know what? we don't want you to even be able to register a domain name or have any voice.
But that's a dangerous precedent, right?
I think it's a very dangerous precedent. Of course it is.
We have to respect each other's opinion, and if there's a certain sect of group or people that you don't agree with, that's okay. You ban them, but don't. What Twitter is doing, I think, is going to be, and same thing will happen with Google, with Facebook, and that's exactly my point. We have to empower the people, let them have an opinion, and if ICO is the route, and if crypto is the route, then I think from a standpoint of SEC, I think it will be good for SEC, and it's beneficial to the people because they're going to protect the people by saying, hey, in the next 30 years, our 401k plan is going to go, kaput. How about this? We let everybody here in the United States put $100 in any ICO they want, and they don't have to be accredited.
Here's the way they should handle it.
Yep.
Instead of saying, in the last 2 years you made $200,000 a year, you got $1 million in net worth, therefore you're smart, which we all know is not true. Like, we've all met very rich people in this town who are very stupid. What they should do is have a literacy test, a financial literacy test. Just like if you want to drive a car, they don't say like, well, have you made $200,000 a year this year? They say, take a driving test. There are economics professors who make $100,000 a year or $75,000 a year who are not allowed to invest, but yet they're allowed to teach economics.
Right.
So why not just have a test? And that's really where I think the SEC will eventually go, because it is arbitrary, the number, and it is antiquated, because you could be incredibly sophisticated and not yet be rich and on your way to getting rich. And the way the system is set up now, rich people get to invest in private companies. Private companies are where all the wealth is generated. By the time a company goes public, like Spotify just did, they're worth $30 billion. All the alpha's been taken. And that's another reason why crypto was so appealing to people, was you didn't have anybody saying, hey, you have to pay taxes or you have to be accredited. And so there is always some kernel of truth, even when you have something like the great fraud that occurred in crypto. The underlying technology real, the potential real, and then some of the people involved, very credible people who might change the world. But this cleanup process is going to be arduous, and I think the trowel of despair will get worse. Like, I think crypto's got another 50% or 75% cliff that it's going to hit this year. In fact, Bitcoin, I thought it was possible Bitcoin will go to zero. I think it's probable as an outcome that Bitcoin will be replaced by a better technology, and that Bitcoin could actually very quickly fall out of favor. And if it does, the cascading effect of how it went up, greed, FOMA, and FOCA, fear of cashing out, the reverse could happen. You could have a fear of hodling because you'll be the last idiot who kept their Bitcoin and didn't move to Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, whatever the next better EOS system is for holding and storing cash. And because it's unregulated, there's no circuit breakers, really, right?
But do we need the circuit breakers?
Well, if it's going to be trusted...
I mean, if an 18-year-old can go to war today, and if the 18-year-old wants to, do it...
Yeah, it's just something to be aware of.
Right.
Because you do have circuit breakers in other places, and you do have real revenue in certain companies. So when we look at the stock market, which is what a lot of people in crypto would like to use as an analogy, well, that's highly regulated, audited, and even in a highly regulated and audited place where there's lots of revenue, you can have an Enron. You can have a Bernie Madoff. You could have all kinds of odd stuff. And Bernie wasn't public, but Enron certainly was. So you can have really weird things that occur, even in a highly regulated space. In an unregulated space, the velocity and the possibility of going to zero or going to 19,000, whatever it is, just becomes great. And we've never seen a global unregulated casino before.
Right.
This is a global unregulated casino. And that's why when people in Asia got involved, in Korea, you're not allowed to play poker if you're a Korean. So when I was there playing poker in Walker Hill Casino 10 years ago, I was playing with GIs and other, Japanese tourists, no Koreans. Then they gave Koreans the ability to trade crypto, and that was a big part of the boom, I understand, was Koreans coming online. And
roughly 40 to 50% of Korean citizens own crypto.
Right. This is because of the pent-up demand for gambling. There's not the fundamentals of crypto. They had a pent-up demand in that country to speculate. And that's kind of the dangerous thing. People over there were buying crypto without knowing what they were buying. And then anytime something new was made available on one of the exchanges, it went up. not because they knew what it was, but because people were just trying to bet on the next thing.
I do agree that there is some bad elements there, but I don't think there's a broad stroke where we say the entire model, the fundamental model of power to the people, decoupling the powerhouses, whether it's the SEC or the government or Twitter, getting it down to the people. I think just like Uber destroyed the taxi unions, I think that cat is out of the bag now. We can't roll it back. I don't think SEC is going to have a hard time rolling it all back and say, hey, this is the way we have done it for the 100 years, and we're going to do it for the next 100 years. We're not going to be a Kardashian type 3 civilization just by doing that.
I heard the same argument from people who said you could never put Napster back in the bottle, and people will always steal content. And that actually, the genie did go back in the bottle, and the people who were stealing films went to jail. And so that's simply not correct in my experience. Enforcement can be a driver of behavior. And when they started putting people in jail for sharing screeners and banning people from the Screen Actors Guild, they threw somebody out of the Directors Guild for doing this. They also put a gentleman in jail from New Jersey for sharing Wolverine ahead of time. And you can look that one up. He went to jail for 18 months or 36 months. Yeah, you can stop stuff that's illegal. And in fact, in China, they're putting people in jail for sharing VPNs. Not crypto.
Right.
Just the ability to see the uncensored internet. They started arresting people for that. And so...
But just that example of VPN, banning by China. I mean, if I just put an analogy, let's go a little bit back. Do you feel that there's a third category between securities and utility, that there might be another route for the SEC to go, versus just stick to black and white? Either you're alive or you're dead. There's nothing in between. Yeah,
I think the SEC's position is going to be it's a security period. I don't think they're going to let people take this utility route. If people can freely trade them for money. So the reason why airline miles and Chuck E. Cheese tokens are not, the SEC is not coming down on those two things, is because you don't see this vibrant market of people exchanging them for cash and people speculating on them with their wealth and their retirement. So as long as the consumers, and you don't see people doing that with airline miles either. People aren't accumulating airline miles because if I buy 1 million airline miles today, in 6 weeks I might have 2 million. People don't do that. And in fact, you can buy airline miles.
Right.
But because they're fixed and they don't appreciate in the way that we've seen crypto, the SEC doesn't come down on them. So the behavior of people in this ecosystem will drive how the SEC views it. And the behavior is to speculate.
Do you think kids should be allowed to hold a wallet?
Sure, why not?
Crypto
educate
wallet?
Kids, yeah.
So when Coinbase says, hey, you need to be 18 to have a wallet?
Well, listen, to your point, very hard to regulate you and I just setting up a wallet and giving it to our kids. So that's going to be a hard one to regulate. And it's not like we're stealing somebody else's intellectual property or hurting anybody by doing it.
Right.
So enforcement would be probably light on that issue in a pragmatic, practical basis.
What if the school jockey at a 10th grade, 11th grade creates his own coin as a popularity coin and the kids start trading between themselves?
Yeah, this is the idea that kids do not have to actually obey the law, also very farcical and crazy because kids now are sexting each other. This is a dangerous trend because when it happens, they start sharing pictures of each other and they have round up kids doing this and then told them you're now transferring child pornography, and kids have gotten in a lot of trouble for this. So
yeah, but pornography and
of course,
technology.
But just the point is the same about illegal behavior.
Right.
And so on the spectrum of illegal behavior, obviously crypto is not anywhere near child pornography, but the same behavior, kids behaving badly or doing things that are suspect, they're going to need to be regulated, or just think about the ramifications of it. So if a kid created a coin, sold it to all their friends, and their friends lost all their money in their college tuition, and then that one friend made all the money, then we would feel differently about it, wouldn't it? Well, that's what ICOs are. I mean, these people are just absconding with the money. We're seeing story after story. The statistics on ICOs have been extraordinary, right? 60, 70% are now defunct, never released a product.
But the same happens in a regular startup where 99%
100% incorrect. 100% incorrect. The starting line for startups, as we talked about before, is you released your product, you had an MVP. The starting line for ICOs has been a white paper. So these are two very different starting lines.
But it's similar to having a business plan 20, 30 years ago. So
Right.
ICOs are on a same trajectory, but they are 20 years apart.
The difference was you had to go to a bunch of smart people in a room, present your idea, and then they would give you a small amount of tranched capital to make sure you stayed on course.
That part I agree.
And there's no tranching in ICOs, and there's nobody in the room being the arbitrator and saying, hey, come to Sand Hill Road, you'll visit 30 VCs, and you'll have to clear a market. So there's no market clearing. That's the other problem. And really, the real crime of the crypto space is that it hasn't been able to regulate itself. And that is why the SEC is coming down so hard right now. Y'all could have avoided it. You could have just said, like, we're going to cap our ICO raise at this amount. But people got greedy.
Right.
And when you get greedy, what happens? You go to jail. And that's what we're seeing. These kids who just got busted in the Floyd Mayweather ICO, and Floyd Mayweather is going to get in trouble for this. You're promoting.
True. The promoters will to a certain extent, get, yep.
If they had raised $3 million, some reasonable amount of money, and said, we're capping it at $3 million, and then, hey, you know what? If you're interested, we'll put you on a list. When we launch our product, we'll raise $5 million, and then after that, if we get to $1 million in revenue, we'll raise $15 million, and just pace themselves.
Right, right.
You wouldn't have
I do agree that there has to be some governance in there where...
What is Telegram going to do with $2 billion? How do you deploy $2 billion?
By Facebook.
I mean, it might cost a little more for that, but it really is confounding that
Zuckerberg may not have a choice there.
Intelligent people are giving Telegram $2 billion. You realize Telegram could just say tomorrow, we've decided to not do any of this, and we're just going to keep the money. There's no recourse. And in venture, we have something called, and investing in professionally, we have a thing called protective provisions. If you want to raise more money or change the cap table, you got to at least talk to your investors. And that's another self-policing thing that ICO should have had, because you all have smart contracts. You could literally build it in.
Right.
But you didn't even take the time to do that. You got greedy.
So they probably...
You took down the big money with no actual desire to produce the product. That's the cardinal sin. And that's what you got to unwind now. You all have to put up now. You have to build some products that actually get product market fit. And I asked recently on Twitter, what ICO'd product have you used in the last week? And I'll ask you, what ICO'd product did you use last week? Not for a store of value or to transfer money. An actual product that was built on an ICO. Go ahead.
Well,
Number one.
Storj, I've used that for personal backup.
Backing up stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, there's one.
Yeah. And I've used Sensei that did token sale in
but the fact
October.
is you don't really use this stuff on a daily basis. And that's when I talk to everybody in the space. Nobody's really using anything done by the ICOs. So the ICO money that was raised, that better produce some fucking results quick.
Right, but these products are such an early stage. It's like saying, hey, in 2000...
It's been 2 years, kid. Come on now.
No, well, Twitter was in 2007, 2008. You know, there were like few people on there. You know, if you look at look at Facebook, when Facebook started, you know, MySpace was really big.
We'll see.
Right?
I mean, to get into an incubator here in Silicon Valley today, you got to have a finished product.
But that I think is okay. Let's ask in a different way. Do you think United States was the last country to adopt and be fully on board on the adoption curve for Bitcoin, wallets, crypto, and blockchain technology?
You know, it's a bit of a dilemma, because the way the rules are written, as you pointed out, with accredited investors and the way the SEC enforces, we're kind of not designed for it. So it's going to take...
Well, so you'll have another country, just like Africa, that leapfrogged landlines directly into cell phones. You'll have other companies which have unbanked.
I think a lot of this will be offshore. I mean, Puerto Rico there's a reason why all the crypto people are moving to Puerto Rico.
Well, I'm looking at it from an empowerment standpoint. If I have to KYC a day laborer who's only making a couple of dollars a day, and I say, hey, you have to give me a bank statement, you have to give me your driver's license and all of these documents, and I disenfranchise them, another country can come up and say, you know what, you can have a banking system here, it's on your phone, use it, and you know, I get 4 billion people right out of poverty into our tech ecosystem.
The super interesting scenario is when a cryptocurrency becomes a better option for a modern country's citizens than the fiat currency. So it's not going to be America, because we have the best currency, and we've had the greatest currency for a long time. Everybody knows, tremendous, and it's great, amazing.
Are you running for mayorship?
I'm coming up with a $500 bill, and it's going to have Trump on it. And in the background, Mar-a-Lago, because everybody knows it's the best.
And the steak.
But in another country like Spain or Portugal, Italy, Greece, places where we've had problems with currencies, you could see the government lose its control of currency. And that's a situation that I don't think anybody can anticipate exactly how that goes down, because now you've unbundled the currency control and the ability to print currency, which is the tool that governments have used to manage.
Well, then that's exactly that. Why not unbundle that? Why would you want a government to keep printing money and,
stability, I guess. I mean, we live in a time, we have this mirage, which I think the cryptocurrency people point out correctly, that there's some level of stability in our currency, right? And as we saw from the financial crisis or other moments in our history, that there is a little bit of a mirage or a hallucination in some countries where things have gotten largely devalued. So,
got it.
But I'm bullish on this year for crypto, because I think the speculators, the criminals, when there's no appreciation and there's no ability for them to flip to a stupid person the next crypto, and buy tokens at half price and sell them for double or triple or quadruple, as that stuff unwinds, the criminal element, the grifters, the charlatans, there's less motivation for them to be here, which is exactly what happened in the dot-com era, which is not a perfect analogy, but there were a lot of people who were like, I got to get in on this dot-com thing. And then it all crashed and they went away and tourist season ended. I think this is kind of the end of, it feels like the end of tourist season for crypto.
It's good in a way.
It'll be healthy.
Got it.
It'll be healthy. We'll see who makes it through.
I know we are out of time, but tell us about your mayor run.
All right, so.
I know you told me this last time, and I'm still anticipating what's happening.
I have a domain name.
I know you said that.
Mayorjason.com. So that means I'm halfway to running for mayor. No, I have a domain name, and it was kind of a joke, but then a bunch of my poker buddies and friends put up $1.5 million for me to run for mayor. So I have the money.
Why don't you A/B test that now?
Well, I've started actually. I started talking about how I would handle certain things on Twitter in San Francisco, like the break-ins in cars. So I was like, we should double the number of police we have, so that we would be on a per capita basis. We have like 20 or so police per 10,000. New York's got like 44 or something. So it's like, let's double the number of police, and then let's make San Francisco less lawless. And it was a wonderful experience, because I realized exactly how insane me running for mayor of San Francisco is going to be. It's going to be the most entertaining thing ever, because literally people responded to me and told me, like, well, we should not have any policing. We should spend that money on getting people out of poverty. And I was like, well, there are actual criminals and bad people in the world. They're like, no, there's no bad people in the world. There's no criminals. There's just people who are down on their luck. And then I was like, but in this story, they say there's a criminal gang that's responsible for 70% of the car break-ins. So why don't we arrest them? They're like, we don't need to arrest them. We just need to rehabilitate them. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of need to arrest the criminals and realize that there are bad people in the world, and that putting their childhoods aside, you can address both of these problems concurrently. So I'm basically floating ideas and trolling San Francisco right now.
All right.
And that's going very well.
All right, good, great.
And
well, let us know if you need any help, because you're going to be our ICO mayor. We'll ICO your J token and get you the funding.
The platform's pretty simple. Traffic,
okay,
crime,
yep,
and housing. That's it. I'm not working on anything else.
Traffic, crime, and housing.
I got solutions for all that.
Tell me housing, I'm curious.
Housing, very simple. We're going to give people the ability to, for one time, they have to make the decision, like during my mayorship. To build like an extra 30% high if they pay the taxes on that ahead of time. And so this will create greed, like you only have a limited amount of time to pay this. Then we'll take that money and ship it towards the replacing BART with an actual functional mass transit system.
You realize you're just doing an ICO right there.
Absolutely.
Right?
It'll be tokenized.
Fundamentals are
fully
exactly
tokenized,
the same as an ICO.
Fully tokenized.
All right, great.
Thanks,
well, Thank you, Jason. Thank
My
you for
pleasure.
coming again.
Thanks for
I
having
really
me.
appreciate it.
Okay.